Hello, welcome to the Opt-In Podcast. I am Melissa Franks, your host, and this is where we talk about what it takes to be a business professional that is thriving inside of other people's businesses. In addition, we talk about what you, a business owner, will need to know and learn about yourself and employees to grow the business of your dreams. We are in the midst of the last 90 days of 2023. If you have been following along on our journey, every week for the remainder of the year, this podcast is going to focus on one specific concept that's going to help you achieve the goals that you set at the beginning of the last 90 days. Now, maybe you're not participating in this challenge with us and you're just along for the ride. That is perfectly okay too, because the content that we're going to get to in today's podcast is going to be beneficial whether you're running for goals before year end or you're just looking forward to enjoying the holidays. I have been doing this challenge for many years. As I've told you, I'm going to continue to credit Rachel Hollis with this at the top of every podcast because she is the one who has created the concept and mastered the approach in her personal development world. Here we've taken it and repurposed it for a business focus, and this is how it rolls out. You set 3 goals, 1 professional, 1 personal, and 1 development, and then you work for the next 90 days to achieve them. Now, as of this recording, it is the 18th of October. When you're listening to this, it will be the 25th of October. So 3-ish, maybe 4 weeks, depending on how we're counting, into the last 90 days. Last week, we talked about focus and distraction, how to eliminate the distractions, how to improve our focus. And if you are at all like me, you have hit the week where your inspired motivation has run dry. Yep, it's run dry. And I know that it might be a little bit disheartening for you to say, we're not even a month in, we're not even a third of the way into this exercise, and I'm already lacking motivation. Well, the first thing that I want to say is that we create motivation, we don't find motivation. There are not people in the world that wake up every morning and are like, I am the most motivated person in the world. You can hear the most famous athletes in the world, the ones that everybody talks about in louds, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Tiger Woods, Serena Williams. They are going to tell you time and time again that it wasn't motivation that got them out of bed. It just wasn't. And it wasn't other people being motivated that got them out of bed either. The drive came from a completely different place. So here's your permission. If you are not feeling motivated right now, you're in good company. The very best champions in the world also have been in those seasons. And what I want to broach with you is that perhaps some of the motivation has disappeared because you need to make a shift. So what I mean by that is when we set goals, we generally do it with rose-colored glasses on. Generally speaking, when we sit down and we say, what can we achieve in a month, 3 months, a year, we're overly ambitious. We believe that circumstances are going to be in our favor. We say, in the best case scenario, if all the stars aligned, this is what I'm going to achieve. And that is great. We should always do that. We should always shoot for the moon because you're likely to lasso a star. Yep. Always shoot for the moon. And also be really, really happy when you bring home a star. So motivation's probably waning a little bit. You're maybe getting a little bit frustrated. And it's purely because you probably need to pivot. Now, when I came up with the concept for this week, it's because, shock of all shockers, I need to pivot. And as I was considering what that looked like for me and how I was going to do that. And did I need to make evaluations in a different way? I realized I should just come in here real time and we should just talk about actively how you pivot once you've set a goal, once things are in motion, and how you do it gracefully, and how you are kind to yourself while you do it, and what the rules of the road are. And as you know, which I'm probably going to say this every podcast through the end of the year, the very first place I start when I'm going to talk to you about anything is I go to my friend Merriam-Webster and I say, Miriam, what does pivot mean? Now, this is where things get a little bit humorous because I had a pretty good understanding in my head of what pivot meant and how it was defined. And to say that I was wrong is probably the understatement of the month, let's say. I was certain I knew what pivot meant. I was certain that it meant, shifting or turning, changing perspective even. Yep, no. You know what a pivot is? A pivot is a fixed point. It is a fixed point that other things turn or oscillate or balance around. A pivot is something that supports, the fixed point that supports other things, and those other things can move. And after my head exploded, because this was not what I understood, I thought pivot was the thing that you moved, not the fixed point that didn't go anywhere, that was steady Eddie and things around it moved. So, okay, now I'm confused. Have I been using the word all wrong? And then I started to go down this spirally, windy thought process of doom where I'm like, oh my, how many rooms have I been in where I've used the word let's pivot, where I've said let's pivot, and everybody started laughing at me because I was using the word wrong. Like I literally had a solid 10 minutes of I'm an idiot and nobody has told me for a decade that this language that I use on a very regular basis, because I'm an operations executive and we're constantly moving and shaking, that I was using the language all wrong. So spiral of doom was well in play. And so then I kept on scrolling. So I said, thank you, Miriam, for shattering my hopes and dreams. And I kept on going. And then I found an example. And blessed be the example that showed up because it saved my ass. And if you spend any time on my Instagram during basketball season, you will know that my 3 children play basketball. They are diehard basketball fans. They love basketball. They will sacrifice their entire bodies to make a play. And by some, I don't know, wicked sense of humor that the universe has, they're all defensive players. None of them are shooters. So I basically spend 45 minutes completely anxiety-ridden because I'm waiting either for my child to injure somebody else or to get thrown out of a game because they're too aggressive or to foul out. Happened within the first 5 minutes of the first game of last season for one of my children. Also the child that got a technical foul in 3rd grade basketball. First child to ever do that in the league, mind you. So I am not exaggerating. So basketball causes me a lot of anxiety. And as I was scrolling past Miriam and cursing her for pointing out that I was an idiot, I found a basketball example. And the basketball example made it all make sense. And what the basketball example said is that your pivot foot, so remember I said a pivot is a fixed point. So your pivot foot stays in contact with the floor while the human attached to the pivot foot moves in directions on the other foot. Aha! Now I understand. Thank you so much, Miriam, for confusing me. Thank you so much for a basketball analogy to clarify. So if you think about a basketball player on the basketball court, and I'm not going to get super technical in basketball, but they are dribbling down the court. And then at some point they stop. And then you see them take the ball in their hands and they go all the way to the right, and then all the way to the left, and then all the way to the right. And then all of a sudden they passed the ball. And they never moved their left foot. That was their pivot foot. And the reason that they didn't move their foot was because if they took another step, they were going to be called on traveling, and then the other team was going to get the ball. So the fixed point, the pivot, is the foot. The things that move around the foot are the human and the rest of the human that's attached to the foot and the basketball. This makes sense to me, but I know you're now wondering how we got here. But do you have a point? I do have a point. So I have been in a moment the past few days where I have reevaluated the goals that I set for the quarter and have wondered how I can still achieve them because circumstances have changed. And they have changed across the board. So it's not just like one thing has changed and I need to make an adjustment. This is actually like there's been a wholesale amount of circumstances that have changed. And it's really had me evaluate how I'm spending my time, what I'm focused on, where I'm going to be getting value from, what the priority is, etc. And as I was going through that, what kept coming to mind is like, you just need to pivot. You just need to shift. You just don't change the goals. The goals are the fixed point. So in this analogy, they're the left foot that can't leave the floor. The goals are the fixed point. You just need to look around and figure out which direction you need to take because the one that you were taking isn't the right one anymore to get to the goal. My head exploded when I figured that out. That is exactly what needs to happen. My goals are solid. And I had written them in such a way because I anticipated circumstances were going to change. So I looked ahead. I've been doing this for a very long time. And I said, based on what I know now, and based on today's circumstances, if one or more of these circumstances were to change, would these goals still be worthwhile to pursue, attainable, and a priority? And in all instances, it was yes. So when I wrote my goals for the last 90 days, I took into account that there was going to be potentially some sort of change or disruption. And then when it happened, my immediate response was to second guess what I had laid out. And it's a little bit hysterical because 2 weeks after I laid it out was when I started second guessing myself. And as I sat with it and as I continue to challenge myself, do you really need to reprioritize and focus? Do you really need to change what you were running for? Do you really need to abandon the ship and start over? What kept coming to mind was the answer of no. These are still worthwhile. These are still valid. These are still things that you want to attain. However, the plan that you set forth 2 weeks ago is no longer the plan that will get you to where you want to go by year end. Hence, the pivot. So as I said, the fixed point is the goals. And now I need to figure out which direction I want to go. For example, one of my goals that I had was being more available for my kids. And I had a predetermined schedule. They had predetermined schedules. And I kind of understood what that looked like. And then my schedule changed dramatically. And I needed to determine what that meant as far as they were concerned. How I was still going to honor what I said that I was going to do while also balancing the demands on my time. And the plan that I had laid out, what time I was going to bed, what time I was waking up, what I was doing before they got up, what I was doing while they were at school, what I was doing after they got home from school, all of that adjusted. And it adjusted not because I was doing things to make it adjust. It adjusted because of outside circumstances. And all it took was one simple pivot. It just took me saying, that goal is still really, really valid. That goal is still number one as far as all of the other things are concerned. That goal I'm still shooting for. So how do I achieve it with different circumstances? And I've laid out the plan now, and we're going to go with it. And what I did, which is a tip for all of you, is I created a checkpoint for myself. So 2 weeks from now, I'm going to check back in and I'm going to say, is the plan that I put together after circumstances changed still yielding the same result? Am I still doing the things that I promised myself I would be doing? Am I still showing up in the places I promised myself I would be showing up? Am I still taking care of my health the way that I promised myself that I would? I built a checkpoint in that I didn't have before because I've had to pivot, and I may have to pivot again if circumstances change. So that's one really simple example. Another example, and I'm going to use an example of somebody that I have been working with on and off as a client. And this person had set a goal that they wanted to lose some weight before the end of the year. So I've been working with them professionally, but one of the things as we were talking about their last 90 days is they said, I'm not feeling my healthiest, and I think it's impacting my work. And I would like to prioritize my health by the end of the year. And I said, awesome. Like, what's your plan? What are you going to do? And this person had built out a plan for themselves where they were going to move a bit more during the workday than they had been. And they were cutting out a couple of food groups that they knew were just trigger food groups for them. And they were really, really excited about the movement. And then they got injured and the movement wasn't possible. And we had a quick call. And the very first place that my client went to was, I'm going to get rid of the goal. It's just not going to happen. I'll just have 2 goals until the end of the year. I'm just going to get rid of it. And I asked why. And the injury was the reason. I had this plan to move in this way in my day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just not going to be able to do it because I'm injured. And I said, well, is that the only thing that you can do to meet your goal? Is that it? And after a long pause, the answer was no. It's not the only thing that I can do. It just seemed to be the easiest. And so then we brainstormed on some other things that could be done instead. We came up with a plan, and now we're going to have a check-in in 2 weeks to determine if that is yielding the results that the person is looking for and is attainable and achievable over time. So those are kind of 2 examples of how you need to pivot. Now, what happens if something significant occurs that you didn't see coming? I talk a lot about fourth quarter layoff season, which is the period between now and Thanksgiving. Companies that are looking at their year-end results and how they're going to roll into first quarter when they are not performing well, and we are in an environment where companies are not reacting to the economy as swiftly as they should, tend to have large layoffs at the end of the year. We have seen this happen in high tech 2 years running. The hiring boon of the pandemic has now created a layoff environment in the fourth quarter. So what happens if you set professional goals, let's say, and then you get laid off? What do you do? Do you abandon the ship? Do you curl up in a ball and throw in the towel? I mean, yes, you can do any of those things. I'm actually going to compel you to not do that. What I'm going to compel you to do is go back and look at that professional goal. What was the actual result you were trying to achieve? What was it? And what was the outcome of the result? So here's what I mean. If you were trying to meet your fourth quarter sales targets, what were you going to get when you did that? Were you going to get a big bonus? Were you going to get a pay increase? Were you going to get a promotion? What was the outcome? So like you generate the results, you're able to ring the bell, look at, I did it. And then what do you get from those results? What's the outcome? And you can do this for any professional goal. So let's use this example. You had a sales target that you wanted to meet by fourth quarter. That was going to equal a bonus. Okay, how much was the bonus? Let's say it was $50,000 before taxes, because we all know the government takes half. So if you hit your sales target at the end of the year, you are going to see $50,000 in the following year. Now you don't have a job. Now you've been laid off. So if the outcome that you were looking for was to get a $50,000 bonus in 2024, and the way that you were going to do that was by achieving your sales target in fourth quarter, and that possibility doesn't exist anymore, then what possible things could you do to still get the $50,000? You could find a job that pays you more. You could find a job that gives you a signing bonus. You could negotiate your bonus as a part of your severance package. You could go do some independent 1099 sales work for another company and generate it that way. On and on and on. There are a variety of ways that you can see that $50,000 that you were chasing, that you were running for, without meeting the sales target. So the goal, or the outcome in this case, the outcome of receiving the $50,000 bonus check can stay fixed. It can be the pivot point. It can be the pivot foot if we're using the basketball analogy. What you now need to figure out is what you need to do, because one, you can't go to the left because that player is blocked. You can't pass the ball. So you're going to have to go to the right. And what player is open? How are you going to pass the ball? Is it that you have job prospects on the horizon and they'll give you a signing bonus? Is it that you're in a unique situation and you can negotiate how you exit? Is it, I don't know, they lay you off and then they hire you back on as a contractor at a higher rate? There are a variety of things that you can do to still achieve that $50,000 that you had expected if you did the work. You just need to pivot. And I know, easier said than done. For many of you, that's probably an overwhelming concept, especially when we start to talk about money. But I wanted to use it to illustrate that you don't need to give up on what you're working towards just because a circumstance changed. It just means that you need to pivot, that you need to continue to move, that you need to plant the foot and then look around and see which way you are going to be most successful and then go for it. And you may need to do that a few times. So if we stick with the basketball analogy, you plant your foot and you say, I'm going to get a signing bonus for $50,000. That's the route that I'm going to go. And then you throw the ball and you are headed down that path of signing bonus and you move. You're able to pick up that pivot foot and you're able to go somewhere else. And then you plant your foot again when you come to the realization that job prospects aren't coming up as fast. And you look to your left and you look to your right and you start to move around a little bit and you realize that the next best thing that you can do is become a contractor and earn a higher wage than the one that you do in a 9-to-5. And so then that's what you do. But you continue to pivot. You continue to change your perspective. You continue to try something else when a circumstance shows you that what you were attempting to do to get the outcome that you want is no longer available. You do not need to abandon the goal. You do not need to abandon the pursuit of the outcome purely because circumstances change. You just need to think differently. You just need to plant your foot and you need to look around and find the open player on the court. There's always an open player. It may not be the player that you want to pass the ball to. It may not, in the land of Kobe Bryant, I'm going to hold on to the ball because I don't trust all y'all to take the ball because I know what your practice habits are like. You might be feeling that a little bit. You're going to have to take the leap. You're going to have to throw the ball even if you don't trust the player. You're going to have to go down the path that you don't feel comfortable with if you really want to get that outcome that you declared at the beginning of the last 90 days. And this is true for any pivot, for any type that you want to do. You're inside of a business and you're working towards a project delivery or a new product implementation or a technology upgrade, and things don't go the way that you plan. You plant your foot and you look around and you figure out the next best move. The problem that I see today is that we give up too fast. When things get hard, we throw in the towel. When things get hard, we say, this wasn't meant for me. This is for somebody else. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to stop trying so hard. When things get difficult, we stop showing up. And that's on you. This is a little bit of a tough love conversation, but the circumstances can be stacked against you. You can absolutely have a moment in time where you think, I know exactly how this is going to end. I can see the outcome on the horizon. This is my year. And then in a matter of moments, the circumstances can change. And it requires you to plant your foot and look around and figure out which direction to go in next. And those that are high performers, those that demonstrate resiliency, those that can look for the other options when the one they had selected hits a dead end, they're the ones that are successful. They're the ones that continue to make plays. They're the ones that are going to achieve the outcomes that they wanted when they said they would. Understanding how to master the pivot point will make the difference between somebody that wishes they had outcomes and somebody that realizes they have outcomes. I can tell you emphatically that over the course of 20-ish years inside of large-scale corporations and the startup community, that understanding how to plant your foot and look in a different direction is how you achieve long-term success. There is not a linear path in any business setting anymore. Once upon a time, you could get a job on an assembly line and you could put in your years and then get promoted based on what you know and what you demonstrated. And you could continue to do that year in and year out and move down the assembly line and become more of an expert. And when you hit 35 or 40 or 50 years of working, you retire and you get the gold watch and you ride off into the sunset. We are no longer in a business environment where linear career growth is expected or experienced. We are now in an environment where those that have the ability to pivot as circumstances change are the ones that have the most growth potential overall. And there's some irony here because in 2020, there was a very large exodus of people from the workforce, from the traditional workforce, and they went unconventional routes. They started their own businesses. They hung up their consulting shingles. They did all sorts of things where they opted out of the corporate world and they said, I'm going to go work for myself. And what these people did is they said, I just don't have the stamina to operate inside of other people's businesses where things are constantly changing. I need control for myself. I need the ability to steer the ship on my own. And the irony of this, as I said a minute ago, is that when you own your own business, you have a PhD, a doctorate in uncertain circumstances, in planting your foot and looking around and figuring out where the next play is. There is nothing certain in entrepreneurship. Not only is there nothing certain in entrepreneurship, there isn't a handbook that you get when you establish your LLC or your S Corp or fill in the blank that says, and here's how you do it. And if you do all of these things in this order, you too will be profitable. It does not exist. You have to be so much more of an expert at pivoting inside of your own business because it's all on you and the circumstances are unpredictable. You can't see it coming, not by a landslide. So while those of us that work for other people would prefer to have a linear path, would prefer to understand what the job family looks like. And after I do this job for 3 years at Target, what do I happen to do next? That just doesn't happen anymore in corporations. But what I can tell you is it's significantly more predictable and manageable working for somebody else and working for yourself. And so we had this entire exodus of the corporate setting because people didn't want to have to pivot. They didn't want to have to adjust to changing circumstances. They didn't want to have disruption. And they thought that if they could control the circumstances, that they wouldn't have it. And what we're now seeing is many of these entrepreneurs are coming back into the workplace. They're coming back into the workplace because they realized it was more disruptive outside. And they're coming back in with a skill set that you, the long-term corporate employee, don't have because they built resiliency when they tried to start their own business. They spent days and weeks and months and years pivoting because they had to survive. So if you have been inside of a corporate setting forever, if you are new to working and you just graduated college, learning how to pivot is the first thing and the most important thing that you need to do. This is how you demonstrate resiliency. This is how you achieve the outcome despite the path you thought was fastest. And if you're able to master this, then you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with some of the best entrepreneurs in the world, even if they had failed businesses, because they learned how to do it too. So as I sit here, as I said, 18 days into the last 90 days, we haven't even made it 20 days yet. I've had to pivot, and I've had to pivot pretty substantially. And I haven't changed the outcomes that I'm working towards. In fact, I may have even been more specific with the outcomes that I'm looking to get now. The approach that I'm going to take, the direction I'm going to go, the path I'm going to follow, it's different than it was 18 days ago. Dramatically so. My outcomes are still the same. So I want to encourage you. If you are feeling like motivation has run out, if you're feeling like you hit a brick wall, if you've already crossed a goal off of your list because you've said, circumstances changed and I can't do this anymore, I want you to revisit it. I want you to revisit it and I want you to ask yourself, if I achieve this result, what was the outcome going to be? What was I going to get from it? And then say, okay, well, I can't achieve this result anymore because circumstances have changed. How can I still get the outcome? What do I need to do? What's the plan? And put that goal back on there and work the new plan. And when that plan starts to be a struggle, find a new one. I learned something today, my friends. I did not understand that a pivot was a fixed point for which other things can move around. And now I do know. I'm interested to see if I start using language differently as a result, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? Isn't that what they say? But I hope that my podcast full of basketball analogies and soapbox standing and all of the things is at least helpful to you to a certain extent in this season. Because one thing I know for certain is that circumstances change, and those that are able to rise when they do are the ones that succeed in the long run, be it life or business. So I'm going to encourage you to spend a little bit of quiet time over the next week, evaluate your goals, determine if you have to pivot, what that looks like for you, what it means, center yourself around the outcomes that you're looking to achieve, and then execute. Because we're running out of days, friend. We're well into the last 90 days, and you've got a lot to do before we get to the end. So thank you for being here with me today. If you feel like there's somebody out there in the world that needs to understand what pivoting means like I did, please share this podcast with them. I'd love to educate some more people on what the real definition is and how we need to all look at pivoting a little bit differently. Until I see you next time, please remember that you are wise and you are strong and you are capable. And I believe in you.